So now we're going to create a title, which is just after your logo fades out. So your logo fades out, so I'll put the time a little bit after that. We'll choose title, new, default still, main title, just give it a name, leave the rest default. In here you'll notice that there's different types of fonts you can use. I'm just going to pick this one, and we'll go the, followed by the word amazing. And this amazing word, we're simply going to make it a blockier font. You'll see the description or the template for what I'd like this title to look like is available on the website, just you're trying to recreate it. I'm going to take a rectangle tool and create a rectangle here of a blue color. You can choose whatever color you like, but I'm going to choose blue. Something like this. I'll place it underneath here maybe. Take another, the amazing animation. Maybe I'll choose, instead of having it be blue, we'll change the fill color to black so that it looks like it's a hole through the block. So that kind of looks nice. The amazing animation. Maybe we'll go by, maybe we have to change this back from black to something else. Maybe we'll go white again. And we'll put by Amphileon, change the size of it so that it's smaller. Maybe on the next line I'll go, actually you know what, we won't put it as a separate line, we'll do a separate text box completely so we have better control. With music by, I don't know, Coldplay maybe, something like this. And then finally, let's say we were finished with this. Actually, we still need to add the course code, so we'll just add the course code at the bottom. And with this course code, completes our title. And there's no saving in titles, so you'll simply close it. You'll go to this X, and when you close it, you'll notice that in your media box here, in your media browser, I should say, you now have a title called main title. And you can treat it the same way you treated any other video file. You can simply grab it and drag it into the timeline. You can go onto the edges of the objects in the timeline and you can drag to make them longer or shorter. So now you'll notice that my title is now there. So when my thing fades out, I then get a title. That's probably a little bit short. We need it quite a bit longer so that a person can read it. And we can do the same thing to this as we did before with the fade in and fade out. I'll click on the clip that I want to fade in or fade out. I'll place a keyframe, place another keyframe, and then I'll drag one down. So the opacity starts at 0, and then it fades in, it stays on, and then maybe I'll put in another couple of keyframes here for a nice little fade out. Simple like that. Now if you find this is a little bit big, this is now an object, right? It's one whole video clip. It's not a whole bunch of different text pieces. So I can double click on it and I can change the size of my title animation if you like. So now maybe that looks a little bit better. Remember, you don't want it to fill this screen because this represents the whole TV. Rarely is the title of a movie enormous enough to fill the whole TV. Usually it's much smaller in the middle. So this looks to me like about an appropriate size. So I'm going to save this, and now would be a good time to create a secondary copy and email myself that secondary copy. So I'm going to put Stop Action Philion 4 now. You can see I've got a list of them. Actually 5, looks like I already had 4. I'll put 5. So I've got a list started now of these things. Now this isn't really enough to say, yes, I'm fully protected. I should probably at this point email myself that file to make sure that the computer's done nothing bad to it. So we'll do that next, and after that I'll show you how to add the images into it and start doing your actual sequence. Okay, now we've got our title in as well as our logo. The last thing to do would be to add the photos, first of all importing it into the library, and then second of all adding it to your timeline. So let's start by adding it to, first of all, using the import function into our project so that they're available for use. If I double click in the media browser, I get a window so I can import my folder of images. Now you'll notice if I go into here, here are all my images. Now I could just select them all and then import, but what that's going to do is it's going to end up being just a mess of images all the way down here. Instead what I'm going to do, we had created the images folder for a particular reason, right? We said images in a folder and all my pictures are in there. You'll notice that my stuff is still neatly organized because all my hundreds and hundreds of photos are inside the images folder. Here's the reason why we did that. When you click on the images folder and choose import, so not all the files inside, but just the folder, what it'll end up doing is you'll end up with a folder called images here. So it'll actually preserve the folder structure, which is really convenient. So you can see it here, I have a folder where inside that folder is all of my files. This keeps your project very neat and tidy, and it's much easier to find what it is that you're looking for. On top of that, when you go to add your images into the timeline, I'm going to advance this a little bit so there's a bit of a break between the title and the beginning of the film, I can simply take the whole folder and drop it onto the timeline. So you can see now that my pictures have all been added to the timeline one after the other. Now with these pictures added to the timeline, there's a couple of key things we have to change about them. First of all, this one here happens to be, apparently, the right size for my project. That isn't always the case. So it's entirely possible that you have to select all of your images. So I would just create a box around them like this to select them. And then once we have them all selected, we're going to do something called scale to frame size. And that's going to scale your images so that it actually appears into the right size in your video box. So there we go, we've got them all selected. When I right click on all of these, I get an option here for scale to frame size. You'll see that mine is already checked on. So when I imported my images directly into the timeline or dragged them in, it automatically sized them so that they fit inside of my frame. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to use the same kind of process in order to change the duration of each one of these images so that it plays through like a video. So each one occupies a very small amount of time rather than a couple of seconds as is the default in Adobe Premiere. So with all of these pictures selected, and if they're not selected, you draw the box around them like we had just done in the previous example. You can right click on them and you can choose the option for speed duration. So if we go into speed duration, you'll notice that this is the duration for each one of the images. So right now we're at 0.3 seconds or 0.03 seconds, which is actually this is tenths, right? So this is 0.3 seconds. Now I've already changed that, so that's actually a reasonable amount of time, but we can go into this and change it to whatever you like. I'm going to change it to 0.2. I think that's about right for these images. Yours, depending on how much you moved your character each time you took a picture, you may actually have to use a value that's either larger than this or smaller than this. But here's the really important part. You must click on this box, the Ripple Edit box. Because by clicking on this box, what you're actually doing is you're saying, when I've shortened down each one of these frames, please delete the spaces that are created between them. So having changed the duration, now would be a good time to actually test your video and see what it looks like. So if I place my playhead at the beginning just before my images, and if I hit spacebar, you'll see it'll play through. Now it'll play through, and I have a pretty fast computer, so it might play through all the way. But sometimes what happens is it slows down and then it stops previewing. And the reason for that is that you're trying to have the computer switch between fairly large images really quickly. It's difficult for a computer to do that. So Premiere handles that by allowing you to select what is the resolution of the image that you are previewing. Not the actual resolution of your project. That'll still be high quality. But you can actually say, in my preview window, only render a quarter of the actual quality of the images. And if you choose that, that'll actually allow your computer to play this through much more smoothly so you can actually see what's going on. And you can see that, you know, on the screen here, when it's paused, it's high resolution. When it's playing, it's really low resolution. But it's just helping the computer load only part of the information for every frame, so it'll play through a little bit nicer. So if you find it bogging down, just change this to a quarter and things should be a little bit better for you. So now having done that, it would be a good time to preview it, and if you're happy with it, now's a good time to save your project and to email yourself a copy so that you have a backup. Now, when you email yourself a copy, if you need instructions for that, take a look at one of my other videos because I posted instructions on how to use UG Cloud to back up your work. So take a look at that video as it should be helpful. It's something that you should do for all of your projects, and definitely if you haven't done it so far, do it now.